Okay, the directions are factor completely. So when you factor something, you don't just divide by a specific number. You figure out what you can divide by. Can somebody yell out a number that goes into 96? 4. I was thinking an even easier number. 2. 1 goes into everything, so we're not going to use 1. Okay. But now 4 is correct, but I'm thinking like the first thing that I'm going to notice is that this is even. So I'm going to take out that 2, and I'm going to divide out that 2, and I have a 48 left over. What goes into 48? Anything? 2? 2 goes in 24 times. Before I go any further, your teacher might have done this back in the day. 2 is a prime number. 2 is a prime number, meaning I can't take 2 any further. What goes into 24? 24 is easy. You can yell out anything. 12 times by 2, and 2 is a prime number. Is 12 a prime number? Then we go further. What goes into 12? 6, okay. How many times? 2, all right. 2 is a prime number. Is 6 a prime number? No. All right, then what goes into 6? 3, how many times? 2, is 3 a prime number? Yes, so then I can circle that, and that means I cannot break anything else further down. So we keep breaking it down until we get to a prime number. Then, when I write my prime factorization, I could write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, or, because that's a lot of writing, I could shorten it, and I could say 2 to the 5th times 3. So when you're asked to factor something, you're breaking it down to its primes. When you're asked to factor something, you're breaking it down to the primes. Okay, so that's what we are doing. We're literally breaking stuff down. The only problem is it's not just a number, we got some variables. So you can see what's happening. We're going to be breaking this down to its primes. To get there, we have something called a factoring flow chart. This is a step-by-step what to do if you get stuck. In order to do this, you need to know what a term is. Okay, when we've got terms in math, they would be separated by a plus or a minus sign. They're going to be separated by a plus or a minus sign. So just looking ahead, I'm going to come to this factor flow chart. I'm going to come back to it in a moment. Just looking ahead, if I were talking about the number of terms in question A, I'm going to look for any plus or minus signs. Here's one. So how many terms does that separate? How many things does this one plus or minus sign separate? 2 terms. How many terms does this one minus sign separate? 2 terms. How about this one? We've got a plus sign, and then we've got a minus sign. So how many terms does this one have? 3 terms. 1, 2, 3. Okay? That minus sign actually belongs to the second term. This is actually a, what am I writing a 2 for? 14a plus negative 7. So that minus sign belongs to that second term also. All right, going back up. So we have 3 scenarios at which we're going to learn how to factor. We have 2 terms. We have 3 terms, and we have 4 terms. But before it even matters how many terms there are, you have to do something first. GCF. That stands for the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor. And again, factors would be anything that you could divide into it, anything that we would break it down to be. So when we look for the greatest common factor, we look for the biggest thing that is in common. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to factor the GCF from each of these examples. So I'm going to start out with question A. And I'm going to look at each term. I'm going to look at 14a, and I'm going to look at minus 7. And I'm going to say what number divides into 14a and divides into minus 7 evenly. Louder. 7. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide that 7. But it does not go away. I'm not dividing it away. We are undistributing it. Remember the distributive property? We're going to undistribute. It is the distributive property backwards. So I'm going to take that 7 and I'm going to put it in front of a parenthesis. And when I divide out that 7, 14a divided by 7, we have 2a left over. And then when I divide the minus 7 by a 7, minus 7 over 7, what's that give me? Not 0, we're not subtracting, we're dividing. Huh? I'm thinking I heard a negative 1 there. So this is the factored form. This is what we're trying to get. Now, factored form, no, I don't know what I was going to say there. But to check your answer, you can check by doing what we did for homework last night. You could multiply it back in. I get 14a minus 7. So I could check it. So we're just using the distributive property. All right, the next one. I'm going to look at 10x to the 5th and 20x to the 3rd. Look at each term. What can divide evenly into both of these terms? Ella. 10 is part of the correct answer. 10 does divide evenly. That is a common factor, but it is not the greatest common factor. So we have other stuff there that's not a number that can divide into that evenly. So what else could divide into that evenly besides the number 10? Sierra? So 5 is already, like if I divide out 10, I don't have a 5 left over. So 5's kind of already taken care of by saying 10. So imagine that I divided out the 10. Actually, I will do it. You guys don't write it down. Just look at mine because I'm going to erase it. Imagine I took out the 10 already. I would have left over.
Pardon the interruption. At this time, any juniors with last name beginning A through M, if you need your picture retaken, please come to the Aquila.
Oh, Oh, you're an S. I was thinking your first name.
Please come to the auxiliary gym for picture retakes. Thank you.
Okay, if I took out that 10, does x to the 5th and 2x cubed have anything in common? They do. Tessa, what do they still have in common? They've got x's in common. So even though it's not a number, it is something that's multiplied in there. So that is something that we're going to factor out. So I'm going to erase this last step because that's not the greatest common factor. How many x's can I take out of both of them? What's the most amount? Aya? So I can take out x to the 3rd. I can't take out 4 of them because 20x to the 3rd doesn't have 4 x's. The most I can take out is 3 of them. Genero, are you okay? No. Yeah, just a little tap. Little tap. Hola. Good morning. Buenos dias. Okay, so I'm going to take that 10x cubed out. What are we going to have left over? So I take out the 10. I take out 3 of the x's. How many x's will I have left over? 2 of them. Minus sign. I take out the 10, and I take out all of the x's, and I just have the number 2 left over. Now we look at x squared minus 2. Does that have anything in common? Does an x squared and a minus 2 have anything in common? No. So that is my factored answer. You can check it by distributing it back. 10x to the 5th minus 20x to the 3rd. That's how you can check it. All right, the next one. 108x and a 72. First of all, do they have any of the letters in common? No. So we're only looking at numbers. What is the greatest number that goes into 108x and 72? Six? All right. If I divide 6, I get, oops, 6, that's going to be 1 time, carry the 4, I got 18. X minus 1, 2. 18x minus 12. If 6 is the answer, that means that 18x and the minus 12 have no numbers, no factors in common. But they're both even. So I don't think 6 was the greatest. Jaden? 36, is that what she said? Or you said 6? Oh yeah, you said 6, right? Okay. So what I want you to see, and the reason why I went with her answer, is because I want you to see this might happen to you. You still need to look at this and say, did I take out the greatest number? I didn't take out the greatest number. Oops. So we try 36. And that's going to give me 3x minus 2. Does 3x and minus 2 have anything in common? No, so this must be the greatest factor. All right, the next one, we have 3 terms. So when we pull out the greatest common factor for this one, we have to look at all 3 terms. All 3 terms. Let's look at just the numbers. Is there a number that is in common in all 3 terms? We've got a 2, a 12, and a 14. Number in common? Yell it out. 3? Did I hear a 3 in there? 2. Now, if I divide 2 into 12, I get 6. If I divide 2 into 14, I get 7. They have nothing else in common. How about letters? How many A's can I divide out of all of these? How many A's? Just 1. This one only has 1 A. So I can't take more than 1 A out because this one only has 1. It has to be the same that we take out. How many B's can we take out? None. The middle one has a B, but nobody else does, so it's not common. So we're taking out just 2A. And when we take that out, we have in the first term, we took out the 2, and we took out 1 of the A's. So we have 2 of the A's left over. In the middle term, we took out the 2, so we have a 6. We took out 1 of the A's, so we have an A left over, and that B is left over. And then in the last term, we took out the 2, so I have 7. And we took out the A, so I do not have any variables left. And then we just double check, does A squared, 6AB, and minus 7 have anything in common? No, then we must be done. That is factoring the greatest common factor. That's called GCF. GCF. Greatest common factor. Section is called factor by grouping. Factor by grouping. There are different ways of doing this, and for those of you that would like a challenge, I will give you a challenge when you've practiced some of these. But the ones that we're going to do are going to be basic, so they're all going to be the same. So we're going to do factor by grouping when we have 4 terms. So when we have 4 terms, we do factor by grouping. First of all, we always look for a GCF. No matter what, how many terms there are, we're going to always look for GCF. So look in these 4 terms. Is there a greatest common factor for all 4 terms? 3xy, 15x, 2y, 10. No. If there is not a greatest common factor, we just move on. You just have to check for it every single time. Okay, so that's checked. Now we're going to do factoring by grouping. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to group 2 terms together and 2 more terms together, and we have to have a plus sign in between. There must be a plus sign in between. So on this next one, I'll show you what to do. For this one, we already have that plus sign, so we're good. Now we're going to factor the first group. So we're going to completely ignore 2y minus 10. We're going to look at just the first group, and we're going to look at 3xy minus 15x, and we're going to say, is there a greatest common factor? Just for this group. Yeah? Emma, was it 3? Is that what you said? So if I take out 3, there's something else in common there. X. So 3x is the greatest common factor. So I'm going to take out 3x, and I'm going to have a y minus a 5 left over. Now we're going to do that a second time, but in the other parenthesis. We're going to look at 2y, and we're going to look at 10, and we're going to say 2y and 10, is there a greatest common factor? 2y and 10. 2y and 10. Yell it out. Come on. 2. So we've got a 2 here and a 2 here that we can divide out. I'm going to bring down my plus sign, and I'm going to put that 2 in front of a parenthesis. And inside of that parenthesis, I'm dividing the 2, and I get y. I'm dividing the 2, and I get 5. So now something magical happens. Now what we have is we have one plus sign in between, making this a term, making this a term, and making this a term. So when we have two terms separated by a plus sign, we're now going to do the GCF of these two terms. Tell me the two big purple lines, above the two big purple lines, what do they each have in common? What is the same above those big purple lines? Corey? More than just -5. So y, and I'm not going to call it -5, I'm going to call it y minus 5, is the same for those two terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put y minus 5 as a greatest common factor. And I'm going to undistribute that y minus 5. I'm going to put it in front of a parenthesis. It's going to go in front of a parenthesis. So I undistributed that y minus 5. It's going to go in front of a parenthesis. So when I go back and I'm taking out the y minus 5 from the first term, what is left over in the first term? No, so I'm taking out the y minus 5 right here. What's left over? Here, maybe if I do it this way. Here's my first term, and I took out the y minus 5. What's still there? What's still there, Corey? In the first term, 3x, yes. I just didn't talk the second one yet, but you're right. 3x, oops, wrong color. 3x. Then I do the same thing for the second one. I'm going to take out, here's the whole term, but I'm taking out the y minus 5, so we're left over with the plus 2. That's what's left over. So this is getting us back to what was multiplied together to give us the original question. Y minus 5 and 3x plus 2. Okay, same thing again. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to notice that we have 4 terms, and we're going to check for a greatest common factor. So look in these 4 terms. Is there a greatest common factor? No. Okay, but we looked for it, so we get a check mark on that. This is 4 terms, so I am going to separate it with groups. I'm going to do factor by grouping, but I don't have a plus sign in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. Rewrite. So I'm going to have 8a to the third minus 2a squared.
The interruption once again. Any juniors with last names beginning with N through Z who need picture retakes, please come to the auxiliary gym. Again, that's juniors. Last names N through Z, come to the auxiliary gym for picture retakes. Thank you.
Okay, so I did, instead of having this subtraction sign here, I just made that into plus a negative 12a plus 30. So I just changed it into plus a negative. And when I did that, now I can separate these. So I have a plus sign in between. Then our next step is that we're going to do a GCF for each of these groups. So we're going to do GCF each group. So what is our GCF for 8, a to the third, 2a to the second? GCF. Macy, what divides into 8 and 2? Can't hear you. Oh, does 4 divide into 2? Not evenly. So what divides evenly into 8 and evenly into 2? 2. Macy, one more question. Is there anything else that these two terms have in common besides numbers? How many A's maximum do they both have? So that's me adding them together. I'm going to know separately, one has 3 and one has 2, so how many do they have in common? Oh, 2 of them. If you leave them there, I'll help you pick them up after. So we're going to take out 2a squared. When we take that out, we're going to have left over 4a minus, oh no, I need your help. I'm dividing 2a squared by 2a squared. What happens when I divide the same thing on top and the same thing on the bottom? What do I get? Do I get 0 or do I get 1? I get 1 when I'm dividing, I get 1. All right, the other parenthesis, same stuff. We're going to divide a common factor. What can go into 12a and a 3? What can go into that? 3? All right. So if I take out 3, I'm going to have left over a minus 4a plus 1. Now I'm going to say stop, because in order to do this, these parentheses have to match. They have to be the same. They are not exactly the same. They're pretty darn close, but they're not exactly the same. So I have to manipulate this a little bit further. When I took out that positive 3, that left me with a negative 4, but I look over here and I actually want a positive 4. What else could I take out of this first term so I could be left with a positive when I'm done? How could I manipulate what I'm taking out so that this becomes a positive 4? What do I still need to take out so it's not negative anymore? I need to take out a negative. Okay? So up here, I should be taking out a negative 3. If I take out a negative 3, that's going to make this a positive 4, and that's going to make this one a minus 1. So if your signs are switched, you just need to take out a negative number rather than taking out a positive number if your signs are switched. All right, and then we have to look at these as one big term, and then this over here as one big term. And what am I going to factor out of both of these terms? What will I factor out of both of these terms? Four a minus 1. 4a minus 1. That's what I'm going to take out. I'm going to put it in front of a parenthesis. 4a minus 1. I'm putting that in front of a parenthesis. What goes inside that parenthesis? What's left over when I take out 4a minus 1? What's left over? Ella, what's left over? Two a squared minus 3. Okay, that is factor by grouping. Almost done. We have one more that we're learning today. And the last section that we're learning today is for 2 terms. First of all, GCF. We always want to check for GCF first. So we look here and we look at 16x squared minus 9. Is there a greatest common factor for 16x squared and a 9? No. So we don't have to do that. We just had to check for it. Now, all of these we are going to check for something called difference of squares. Difference of squares means subtraction sign and it means perfect squares. If we are subtracting perfect squares, then we have something called difference of squares, and I will move on and show you what to do. So this first one, the first question you want to ask, is it subtraction? Do we have a subtraction sign? Yes or no? Yes, we can proceed on. Can I rewrite 16 as something squared? 16 is what squared? 4 squared. X squared is already written squared, minus 9 is what squared? 3 squared. So I can rewrite it. If I can rewrite it, then that means that we have perfect squares. What you do is you take what is squared and you're going to write 2 parentheses. One is plus, one is minus. And you're going to take what is squared and you're going to separate them into the 2 parentheses. 4x, 3, 4x, 3. And that's how we do difference of squares. Remember in our assignment, those few questions that the middle canceled out? And this assignment that we were looking at, the ones where the 2 middle ones canceled out? Those are these kind, where we have one plus and one minus of the same number, so that the 2 middles would cancel out when we multiplied them together. Okay, let's look at the next one. First question, is it subtraction? Yes, so we can proceed. 81 is what squared? 9 squared. Minus 25 is what squared? 5 squared, x squared. So we have difference of squares. I'm going to make one of them plus, one of them minus, and I'm going to write the 9 in both fronts, and I'm going to write 5x at the second term in both of them, and I'm done. And I have factored this one. Four a squared minus 1. First question. Is it subtraction? All right. Then my next question. Can we write 4 as something squared? What? 2 squared? We also have a squared. Minus, can we write 1 as something squared? It's 1 times 1. So it's 1 squared. So we can do it. We've got a difference of squares. One of them is plus, one of them is minus. We've got 2a plus or minus 1. All right, last one. Do we have a minus sign? Oh, we can't do it.
The interruption. At this time, we ask for seniors who need picture retakes for their IDs to come down to the auxiliary gym if your last name begins with the letters A through M. Again, this is for seniors, A through M, for picture retakes for your IDs. Thank you.
Okay, so because I could not factor it at all, it's prime. It's not factorable. Prime. So this next section says factor each expression completely. So the first thing that we want to do is look for a GCF. In question A, is there a GCF? Greatest common factor. Corey, what is it? 10. 5 and 2 both work, so then 10 is the greatest common factor, yes. So we're going to take out that 10. We're going to be left with x squared minus y squared. Now this factor the expression completely means it is possible that there's more than just one thing to do. So what I do now is I look inside and I have 2 terms. And anytime we need to factor something with 2 terms, we look at our notes. Anything with 2 terms, we are trying to see if they are perfect squares, difference of squares. If it's 2 terms, that's where we go. So x squared minus y squared, is it subtraction? Do we have perfect squares? So what we do is we bring down the 10. We do 2 parentheses, 1 plus, 1 minus, and we do the square roots. We do the x and the y, and we do the x and the y. Question B, is there a greatest common factor, Barak? What is it? 4. So I'm going to take out that 4. I get x squared minus 25. So that is 2 terms. That means I go to the 2 terms section, which is difference of squares. Is this subtraction? Can I rewrite it as something squared? What's 25? Sierra? 5 squared, yeah. And so if I can rewrite it that way, then we can write 2 parentheses, 1 plus, 1 minus, x and x, 5 and 5. A squared minus 16. Holland, is there a GCF? A greatest common factor? What is it? So 1 doesn't change the number at all. 1 is always going to be a greatest common factor. If I take out 1, I'm left with a squared minus 16, so that doesn't count. Is there a different number that divides evenly into both a squared and 16? Okay, so there is not a greatest common factor. Does that mean it's prime? No. What it means is you just skip and go on to the next thing, which this has 2 terms. And anytime we have 2 terms, we look at, is it a difference of squares? Do we have subtraction? Yes or no? Yes. Can we rewrite this as a squared minus something else squared? What squared? 4 squared. So then I can do difference of squares, a plus 4 and a minus 4, and I factored it. Okay, that's almost what your assignment's going to be like, only this is more of what your assignment's going to be like. It's going to be like all the different ones mixed together. So we're going to look at the first one. 9x squared minus 49. What is our very first thing we need to do? What should we do? Greatest common factor is always the right answer. We always, always, always look for GCF. Is there a greatest common factor in 9x squared minus 49? What divides evenly into 9x squared and 49? Nina? Nina? Oh, nothing. I couldn't hear you. I can never hear you. I need to move you up here. You need this, don't you? Okay. All right, so there is not one, but we move on. And now we have 2 terms. And if we have 2 terms, that's the one where I say, is there subtraction? Yes. Can we rewrite this as perfect squares? 9 is 3 squared. X squared is already squared. Minus 7 squared. So we have 1 plus and 1 minus. We have a 3x and a 7. The next question, we've got 3 terms. What should we do first? Jenna, what should we do first? What's our first step? Always. Jenna, you know I'm talking to you? Okay. Huh? Jenna, what is our first step of factoring always? Talking about factoring, what is our first step always? Already did that. I wrote the words first step right in front of it. Okay, so is there anything in common in these 3 terms, Jenna? Okay, so let's start at x. How many x's do they have in common? We've got 2 here. We've got 3 here. We've got 4 here. How many do they have in common? We've got 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them. So if I've got a group of 2, a group of 3, and a group of 4, if I were going to line them all up and match up, how many would like match up for each group? Got 2, I've got 3, and I've got 4. They all have 2 in common. You also said y.
Pardon the interruption. At this time, if anyone needs to...
How many y's do they all have in common?
At this time. Again, anyone who needs their picture retaken, please come to the auxiliary gym at this time. Thank you.
They all have one y in common. What about numbers? We've got a -2, we've got a -8, and we've got a +4. Is there anything in common there? Right. But what do 2, 8, and 4 have in common? They're all even. They all have 2 in common. Now, I know you said it's not negative, but I'm going to tell you guys, if it starts with a negative sign and we're doing GCF, I'm going to want you to take out the negative. Okay? So even though they don't all have the negative, we can take out the negative. Hello. Okay, thanks. Emma. All right, so we're going to take out a -2 from each of these, and we're going to put it in front. -2x² y. And we're going to see what's left over. And Emma, there is one worksheet. There's other stuff on the module, but I didn't know how long it would take us today, so it's just the top part of the module, and you can watch the rest of the notes. So I'm going to take out -2x² y. When I take that out of the first term, is there still a first term? If I take out -2x² and a y, is there still anything there? Stop shaking your head no. Jenna? There is a 1. I'm not subtracting it, I'm dividing it. So because we're dividing it, there is a 1 still there. Be careful. I'm stressing that because that's where people make mistakes. All right, the next thing we're doing is we have a -8x³ y², and we're taking out the negative sign. We're dividing by 2, we're dividing by x², and we're dividing by a y. What is left over? We have a 4, and it's a positive. We have an x, and we have a y. So 4xy. In the last term, we're dividing out a negative, but it was positive, so we are left with a negative sign. We're left with a 2. We're left with 2 x's, x², and we're left with 2 y's, y². And this is the 3 terms, and I haven't taught you how to do 3 terms yet, so there won't be anything else to do with 3 terms because we haven't learned it yet. All right, this next one's tricky. Let's see. First step. First step. First step. Corey, what's the first step? Is there a GCF with x to the 4th and y to the 4th? Is there a greatest common factor? Something I can take out? Nope. Next question. How many terms does this have? 2 terms. Okay, so it has 2 terms. And when we have 2 terms, we're looking at difference of squares. Difference of squares. So we say, is it subtraction? Can we write this as something squared minus something squared? You're saying no. Did you change your mind, or are you saying no? Okay. The answer is yes, we can. Jenna, do you know what it is? No. 1 times 1 is not x to the 4th. So what times what gives me x to the 4th? What times itself gives me x to the 4th? Tessa? X squared. If we do x squared times x squared, then we have 4x's there, x to the fourth. All right, and then so y to the fourth, that would be y squared times y squared. So we do have a difference of squares. Hold on, this part's important. So we're going to have a plus and a minus. We're going to have x squared and y squared. But this one's not done. This one's not done. Each of these now is 2 terms. And right here, this is a plus sign, so it is not subtraction. This one right here is done. But this one right here is subtraction. And they are already written as perfect squares. So this second part becomes 2 parentheses, 1 plus and 1 minus. X and y, x and y. You see how that went and went? That one went further. That's maybe the trickiest kind. I'm out of time. We didn't get through all those, but that's okay. Your assignment is just when you're in the modules. Oh, I'm not back in the module anymore. Hold on. Here it is. When you're in the modules, your assignment is just the first assignment, just this one. I have other stuff there because I didn't know how long we would take. But our assignment is just the first one that is due Friday. See, I put a due date on there now. Look at that. I even put a due date on there because I haven't uploaded anything yet. And we might just check it in class. I'm not sure yet because sometimes I like checking things in class so we can do questions right then. But anyway, if you do have questions prior to me either uploading an answer key or prior to Friday, please contact me. Okay?